What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Big Dog Brett, and today we are going to be talking about the Georgia versus the Michigan Wolverines college football game in the Orange Bowl. We're going to get into it right after this. All right, everybody. There is a ton of information here, and I have tried to dig in and find the useful information that you're not going to see kind of broadcast all over ESPN or what you're going to find on pretty much every other college football channel out there. Yes, I'm a Georgia fan, in case you hadn't noticed, but that doesn't mean that I'm blind to the facts, and I try to be as objective as possible. Yes, I make trash talk videos and all that fun stuff, and yes, I'm always going to lean towards being a Georgia fan. But there's times whenever you just have to look at that and go, that was just terrible. So just like kind of what happened with Georgia versus Alabama in the SEC championship game. Hey, Alabama came out and got it done, and Georgia, amongst a comedy of errors, couldn't get it done. So I think there's a lot to be said for Georgia taking that into being motivation, not to take anything away from Alabama. Alabama played an outstanding game. Georgia played a terrible game. Alabama went out there and did what they needed to do and won that game soundly. So that having been said, hats off to Alabama, but Georgia is now focused on Michigan. So let's talk about Michigan a little bit. Michigan is a completely different football team than what we saw out of Alabama. Michigan is really predicated on the run. And I'm going to get into some stats here, so if stats isn't your strong suit, you may want to jump ahead. But if you want to talk about a real breakdown of these teams, you really have to compare heads up, head to head. What have they played? Who have they played? And what have you got? So in the last 5 games, which is really what I want to talk about, if you look at the Iowa game, they came out and dominated. Michigan did a great job, 42-3. I think that's the least amount of points that an opponent scored on them all season. The week before that, they played OSU, 42-27 was the score. And, they absolutely, just skull drug Maryland, 59-18. They did kind of squeak past Penn State, and they had a pretty good performance against Indiana. Or Illinois, IU, whatever it is. Looks pretty good. However, looking at their schedule, they seem to kind of fluctuate all over the board. Georgia's schedule, their last outing against Alabama was a very poor performance. Aside from that, Georgia's been extremely dominant, especially on defense. 45-0 against Georgia Tech, 56-7 against something called Charleston Southern. Neither one of those teams are very good. Tennessee was 41-17. Missouri was 43-6. And you can say Georgia's strength of schedule is not as good as Michigan's, and so forth and so on. And that's probably why you have Michigan ranked as number 2. Georgia lost to the number 1 team, knocked them to number 3. Some could argue number 4. Either way, doesn't matter. What matters is that consistently Georgia has had pretty near the same record in every game, no matter who they've played, with the exception of the one terrible game against Alabama. Georgia's averaging 39.4 points per game. And Michigan is averaging 37.7, so pretty close there. Points allowed per game, even with the blowout at Alabama, Georgia is still only allowing 9.5 points per game, and it was something like 7 points a game in regular season. Michigan's allowing 16.1 total yards, very close here, 442 to 451. Passing yards, Georgia, you would think Michigan would be more run heavy than they are, but they're extremely balanced. Georgia's actually a little more pass heavy than what you would imagine. Georgia's at roughly 248 yards. Michigan's at 228. Yards for rushing, Georgia's at 195. Michigan's at 223. So they're at 228 and 224 for passing and rushing, so they're pretty balanced there. And Georgia is about 50 yards more passing than rushing. I think that's really been partially because of how good Brock Bowers has been this year. He's really kind of been a guy who's stepped into his own and has really been a dominant performer throughout the season. He's had some excellent games. Looking at yards allowed, Georgia's allowing about 250 yards per game. Michigan's allowing 316. It seems like Georgia allows more pass, about 172. Michigan allows about 195. Georgia's only allowing about 80 yards a game in rushing. Michigan's allowing 120. So there's probably not going to be the highest scoring game you're going to see played this season. Both of these teams have moments where their offense and defense are really dominant. Now, there's some reasons for that. One of the big things I want to talk about, and one of the reasons why I think that Georgia's going to have a bigger advantage. Yes, I think Georgia's going to have a bigger advantage. And I'm not saying bigger advantage because they play in the SEC. I'm saying a literal bigger advantage. Georgia will have, unless I'm mistaken, the largest defensive team, at least the defensive front, that Michigan has seen all season. Went back and looked at the Ohio State players. Most of their players are around 275, 265, 280, somewhere in there. They have a couple of players over 300, not many. And I think they even have one player who's like 224 pounds. Iowa, very much the same, very much built the same way. So this is going to be a much bigger front that Michigan is going to have to figure out what to do with. These players that they're going to be facing at the Georgia defensive front are not going to be as easy to create these big openings. Bigger players, bigger bodies, smaller openings, especially whenever you've got a dominant defensive lineman by the name of Carter Davis, a man who typically blocks 2 or 3 players. Now, he had a very bad game against Alabama. I think every team has a bad game throughout the season. I think Alabama's bad game was against Auburn, and I think that Georgia's bad game was against Alabama. Now, if you look at Michigan, Michigan had a bad game against the Wolverines. I would argue to say they had a bad game against Nebraska. That was really unexpected. They only won that game by 3 points. And their Penn State game was not exactly a dominant performance either. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do. They've had games where they've allowed 37 points, have games where they've allowed 29, but they've had a lot of games and games where they allowed 27 against Ohio State. But Ohio State had some moments in that game that were incredible. But most of their games, they're holding opponents under 20 points. So Georgia's got to figure out a way to get through that, and Michigan's got to figure out a way to run the ball. Now, their quarterback, who's a great quarterback, McNamara, not a bad quarterback at all. I really hate that ESPN does that when I'm pulling stats. Looking at both of these quarterbacks, you have Stetson Bennett at Georgia and McNamara at Michigan. Both of these guys are extremely similar. Stetson Bennett, he's at a little over 2,300 yards, and McNamara is a little bit short of 2,500 yards. Stetson Bennett's thrown for 24 touchdowns with 7 interceptions. McNamara is throwing for 15 touchdowns for 4 interceptions. So both of these guys are looking at, they're 3.5 to 4 every 3.5 to 4 touchdowns they throw an interception, statistically speaking. Rushing yards, Haskin has been dominant. Apparently there's a report out that says his ankle's doing much better. He feels great. We'll see how that plays out. Hutchinson, which is their key defensive player, he's really amped up, and he unintentionally, I think, created a stir by saying that nothing's going to stop him. And I think the Georgia coaching staff and players are going to take that personal. We'll see how that plays out. And then receiving yards, Johnson for Michigan, he's at 38 receptions for 609 yards. But Georgia has Brock Bowers, who has 47 receptions for 791 yards, 11 touchdowns, and he's a tight end. So going back and watching these games, watching how Michigan was moving the ball, they really do have a lot of explosive plays. Michigan does a great job of being able to create these moments where they'll pick up 15, 16, 17 yards. And you can see that if you jump into the rushing. For instance, if you look at where's it at? Haskins, he averaged, he's the primary ball carrier. He's at almost 1,300 yards. He'll easily break 1,300 in this game, I imagine. He averages just under 5 yards a carry. But if you look at Blake Corum, he averages 6.7 yards a carry. If you look at Donovan Edwards, he carries 5 yards a carry. This doesn't really tell the tale. If you jump back and you look at, let me find it real quick. We're going to click on. We're going to go here, and I'm going to pull up the Iowa and the Ohio State game just to pull the stats real quick, so I can make sure I get this right for you. Team stats. Nope, I need box score. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. Now, Michigan, whenever they played Iowa, Blake Corum had 5 carries, but he had 74 yards. He was averaging almost 15 yards a carry. There are other players out here. Cornelius Johnson, 1 carry for 17 yards. That's an explosive play. A.J. Henning, 1 carry for 29 yards. That's an explosive play. Michigan receiving. Roman Wilson, 2 receptions for 82 yards. Explosive play. Luke Schoonmaker, or Macher, whichever you prefer. 2 receptions, 49 yards, 25 yards a carry, average. Eric All, 2 receptions, 43 yards, 21 at 21.5 an average. So what you're looking at here is that this really is a team that is kind of designed, at least in my opinion, and set up to try to be explosive at times. If you look at their overall yardage in this game, it's nothing soul-crushing. It's really not. It's a good performance. It's a really good performance, but it's not devastating. What's devastating is whenever they can consistently move the ball, that Iowa would get a team to say a 3-6 or 3-7, and then you would see something pop up like a 20-yard bomb. It was just very, very difficult for them to get any momentum whenever these big explosive plays would hit. And Blake Corum was a big part of that. I think Georgia's really going to focus on trying to stop the run, and I think they'll do a pretty fine job of stopping the run. I don't know how they're going to handle the receiving if they can't get the rushing going, because they're not really predicated on being a consistent short yardage passing. Now, they do have some of that with, Haskins has got good hands. He can get a reception here and there, pick up 6-7 yards. But can they make that consistent enough? I don't know that they can. I'm not sure that the quarterback, McNamara, is really capable of doing that. He's not a bad guy, but again, he's like with Stetson Bennett. You don't expect Stetson Bennett to pick up and carry the team on his back. And that's really what you're seeing here. You're seeing a team from a few years ago that was very similar to Michigan, and that team's name was Georgia. We had an average quarterback, a great rushing running back, and a pretty decent wide receiver. This team looks very similar to the way Georgia looked a few years ago. Great rusher, another rusher on that team who's probably going to break 1,000 yards, 2 different styles of running, and then a couple of okay receivers to decent receivers. That's not a slap in the face to Michigan. Georgia was a quality football team. They just couldn't quite get it done. I don't know if Michigan's going to be able to get over this hump. When you look at Georgia's football team, they're built very differently. And there's some other factors I'm going to get into here in a second. Quarterback-wise, pretty much identical. Not even going to jump into that. Georgia has 2 running backs back-to-back in Zamir White and James Cook. But the thing I'll point out is that the top 5 rushers for Georgia all have 45 or more carries, and they all average 5 yards or more per carry. All of them. So Georgia has a consistent stable of running backs that they can cycle through. When we look at Georgia's receiving team, the top 6 receivers, the top 6 receivers are all receivers that average at least 12, well, we'll say 11.7 yards or more per carry, and they all have 14 or more catches. James Cook, who has 21 catches, who's also a feature back for us, averages 7.5 yards a carry. So not only is he dangerous on his feet, he's very dangerous in the backfield being able to catch. Not to mention Darnell Washington, who averages 16 yards a catch. He's had 9 catches this season, which is not a tremendous amount, but he is highly rated as a tight end. He's, I think, the second highest rated tight end in college football right now. I could be wrong. I might have read that stat wrong, but I believe that's the case. A lot of the other receivers Georgia has average 13 or more yards a catch, and we're not even talking about George Pickens right now, which, he's going to be healthy, he's going to be back, and he could absolutely be an X factor in this game. Looking at Georgia's defense is absolutely stacked. This is a horse that doesn't need to be beat anymore. There are, good Lord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's 16 players on Georgia's team that have 14 or more solo tackles by themselves. And all of those guys are double digits, save one, Dan Jackson, he's at 9. All those guys are double digits for assists as well. This is a team that moves very quickly to the football. Georgia has 41 sacks on the season. It's not that Georgia has any absolutely incredible, dominant game breakers as far as a solo standout performer. All of these guys are 5 stars. And Nakobe Dean has 2 interceptions. Lewis Seen has 1. Darion Kendrick has 2, Keely Ringo has 1, and Christopher Smith has 2, and Jamon Dumas Johnson has 1. So if you don't throw that ball in the right place, Georgia will absolutely pick it off. And we've had at least 3 I know of, 3 pick sixes this year. So if you throw the ball very much, Georgia can be dangerous. I know that Georgia looked very bad against Alabama, and I hear you. You can jump down in the comment section and tell me all about it. But I really feel like that game is starting to look more like a one-off. Georgia had a bad game. Alabama had a great game. Don't tell me teams can't have bad games, because Alabama had a bad game the week before. They only scored 10 points in regulation, and Auburn's defense is not that good. Okay. Now, we talked about Georgia's defense. We got to talk about Michigan's defense. Let's talk about their offense a little bit more. They've got some good players. They just don't have the depth that Georgia has, and I'll get into that here in a minute and why I say that. I'm not saying that to be dismissive of Michigan. Michigan's a great football team, but there's a lot missing here. There really is a lot missing. Size is one of the things that Georgia has an advantage in over all of the other teams that Michigan has played. In defense, Aiden Hutchinson gets a ton of credit for his sacking ability. He gets 4. He's got 14 on the year. David Ajabo's got 11. These are the 2 playmakers. Georgia accounts for these guys, and that's pretty much it. And I feel like Georgia can. I feel like Georgia has the guys up front that's capable of doing this. I just really do. So this guy's going to be keyed up. He's going to be spot on the whole time. Georgia's probably, anytime they're going to suspect that Aiden Hutchinson to try and pull a sack, they are going to pull a running back in and have him block. Is he going to block him all the time? No. But the running backs that Georgia has are far more talented than most of the running backs that have been blocking all season. If you know much about Georgia's defense, Georgia's coaching staff is defensive minded. And so if you don't block, even if you're a tight end, if you don't block, you won't play offense. If you're a wide receiver and you don't block, you won't play offense no matter how good you are. So I really think that's going to be an emphasis. They're going to be looking to shut these 2 guys down, and then after that, I think it's going to be interesting to watch what happens. Tons of talented guys on this team. Not saying there's not. They've got 34 sacks on the season, and 25 of those come from 2 guys. So Georgia's absolutely going to stop those guys. If you look at the stats from Georgia, Georgia's sacks are spread out over the team. You've got 5 for Nakobe Dean. You've got 4.5 for Channing Tindall. You got 1.5 for Quay Walker, 1.5 for Nolan Smith, 2.5 for Devontae Wyatt, 4 for Trayvon Walker, 5 for Adam Anderson, who's no longer on the team, 3 for Jalen Carter, 2 for Carter Davis, 1 for Keely Ringo, 2 for Jamon Dumas Johnson, and 4.5 for Robert Beal Jr., and then there's 1s and 2s scattered throughout. So the difference is that while Michigan has 2 guys that are extremely proficient at the sack game, Georgia has probably 5 or 6. So we'll see how that turns out. Now that we've went through that whole thing, here's one of the things I want to point out, and I think this is what's going to make the biggest difference. I think this is a great season for Michigan. I think Michigan's going to build on this. I think Michigan is going to be more likely to be in a fist fight on a regular basis and winning on a regular basis against Ohio State than they have in the past, because this season is going to really help them. Now, if we go back to 2018, Michigan's recruiting class was 22nd. They had 0 5-stars, and they recruited 7 4-stars. 2019, they were ranked number 8. They had 2 5-stars, 14 4-stars, so a much better year. 2020, they ranked number 10, 0 5-stars, 15 4-stars, so they're still building that 4-star base. In 2021, they had 13. They were ranked 13. They had 1 5-star and 11 4-stars, so they took a little bit of a step back. There is a lot of talent on this team. This in and of itself is 30, 48, 47 4-stars, 3 5-stars. That's just in the last 4 recruiting cycles. There's probably a guy or 2 more there that's left over, and this doesn't account for transfers and whatnot, so just bear with me on that. But here's what I'm saying to you guys. The talent level here is immense. And don't say that Georgia does the most with least, because the only team that is consistently beating Georgia is Alabama, and Alabama consistently beats everybody. So you can't really say that Georgia's not doing much with its talent. We're putting guys in the NFL. Guys are winning Butkus Awards. Guys are winning whatever the award is for tight ends, and this award and that award and All-American. I mean, Georgia's got awards all over the place. So I don't want to hear the whole Georgia's not developing guys, because clearly that's not the case. But back to Georgia recruiting classes. In 2018, Georgia was ranked number 1. We had 7 5-stars and 15 4-stars. In the same year that Michigan had 0 5-stars and 7 4-stars. Georgia had as many 5-stars as Michigan had 4-stars in that year. So think about that. The next year, Georgia had 5 5-stars and 15 4-stars. We had more than twice as many 5-stars and more 4-stars than Michigan did. Following year, Georgia had 4 5-stars, Michigan had 0. Georgia had 15 4-stars, and so did Michigan. Last year, 2021, Georgia had 4 5-stars, Michigan had 1. Georgia had 11 4-stars, and Michigan had 11 4-stars. Same. So if you look at the total number here, Michigan has 3 5-star players. Georgia, 20. 25-star players in just those 4 recruiting classes, and that's not counting anybody that we pulled in the portal. Georgia has 56 4-star players. That's just those 4 years. And there's players there from before that. But my point is that the talent level here is immense. There's a huge, huge difference in talent level. Can Georgia pull it off? They very well should. Georgia's built bigger. Georgia certainly has suffered at the hands of Alabama, but that's been the only team to do that. So it's pretty difficult to jump out here and say that I believe Michigan is going to just dominate Georgia. If you go back and you look at the teams that Georgia has played, teams that have had a strong run game, Georgia has absolutely stopped. Even if you look at the Georgia-Alabama game, Alabama, dominated Georgia in that game. They absolutely dominated Georgia in that game. But how many rushing yards? 115. If you are a Michigan fan and that stat doesn't scare you, something's wrong. They had 3 players that ran the ball. Brian Robinson Jr. ran it 16 times, and he averaged 3.4 yards. He got 55 yards. Bryce Young, the quarterback, scrambled 3 times and picked up 40 yards. Trey Sanders ran it 6. He averaged 3.5. Not good. Georgia still ran for 109. Georgia passed in this game for 340 yards and somehow still lost. So it just kind of is what it is. Georgia couldn't get any pressure. Georgia couldn't get any pressure on Bryce Young, and that was really the deciding factor in that game. They just picked us apart. I don't think Michigan has that kind of quarterback. I think it'll be a good game. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think that Michigan certainly has an opportunity to win this game, but I think the hands are really tilted towards Georgia. Talent-wise, size-wise, experience-wise. Georgia's been to the college football playoff before. There's actually players on this team that have been to the college football playoff. So when I look back and I say, across history, which teams tend to fare best in the college football playoff, and it tends to be the teams that have been there before. So that's not me. That's not me saying that. That's pretty much the way it is. So other than that, there's a lot of talk out there about Georgia playing JT Daniels. JT Daniels is probably not going to play. If you're a Georgia fan, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, JT Daniels probably not going to play. Apparently he tested positive for COVID, and he's under COVID protocols, so he won't. I don't think he'll be able to get back until like almost the day before. So he's not going to be practicing with the team. If he's not practicing with the team, he's not going to play. So even though he's eligible, it doesn't mean that he's going to be able to get out there and pick it up and go with it. Would I like to see JT Daniels? Absolutely. I'd love to see JT Daniels. JT Daniels is a phenomenal quarterback, 5-star, and can really make the offense move. But the player in this, there's two players in this game that I think are going to make the big difference, and that's Brock Bowers and George Pickens. Now, as far as my prediction for the game, if you want my prediction for the game, I'll go ahead and tell you right now. I think that you're going to see a close game up until about the half, and then Georgia's going to start to kind of pull away for it. I don't think Georgia's ever really going to be way out in front unless some mistakes are made. I think that you're probably going to see this game somewhere, I would guess somewhere around the 34 to probably the 21 or 24 mark. I know that Georgia's favored by 7. Georgia has crushed the spread in every game they've played in, unless the spread was something ridiculous like 30 points. Georgia's done a great job this year. Michigan's done a great job this year. I really think that the talent level and the experience of Georgia, having played at this stage before, the bigger size of the defensive line is going to make it hard for Michigan to run the ball. And I think that Georgia has learned from its mistakes in the passing game. So, but other than that, that's really the way I feel. So I'm going to go with Georgia 31, Michigan 24. And that's what I got for you guys today. So I really appreciate you guys coming in. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Stick around for the, we're going to do another video here real soon, Alabama and Michigan. And can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts on it. Leave a comment below and the score and what you think the score will be. And of course, jump down there and tell me how silly I am, because I get that all the time too. So I'm used to it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Have a great day. God bless. Go Dogs.